Hello, my friends. Good morning. I know it might not be morning in your part of the world, but it is here. It's the 15th of January 2020. It's Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. here in New Zealand. It's Chat with Matt. Here we are, hopefully on the Bright Light Facilitator group, free group, to talk about whatever you want to. 30 minutes, roughly, it's the intention to talk. Answer questions, speak to requests, and facilitate some transformation in some way. I know there's a question written in, so let me find it. You can't stop me, although I might need some help. I might need some help this morning. Whew. There's me, live. And there's this question written in from Sister Kate. From 8 hours ago from Byron Bay. That's where Sister Kate lives. Hey, Sister Stacey, how are you? Good morning, good afternoon in your part of the world. Yes, it will be definitely in the Americas after midday, even if you're in the Pacific or not Hawaii. It's a big place. Those Americas. Anywho's. What's going on for you guys? It's been freaking intense, right? It's been an intense week, that is for sure, with the full moon and the eclipse, and then the Pluto-Saturn conjunction with whatever it was, Mercury and the Sun, whatever, four-way conjunction. The thing we did on the weekend on Sunday or Saturday afternoon with helping the, I'm going to mess that name of that ceremony up, but anyway, helping awaken Mother Earth's not sacral chakra, solar plexus chakra, Uluru, and Katu Jata, however you're supposed to say that word. Used to be called the Olgas, old name. Yeah, and then last night I did a in-person light language thing down at the yoga school, which was again very, very powerful. This morning, look at that, I've woken up with that thing across the top of my head. I don't know how that arrived. I have no idea. I don't have any memory of hitting my head anywhere, and I don't remember seeing it on my forehead last night. Hey, Sister Kate, glad you are here. I'm going to I'm going to talk to your question. Whether or not it's an answer is really in the ears of the receiver, not the ears of the speaker. I'm going to my intention is to answer your question very shortly. But yeah, I was just saying that it's been an intense, hey, Sister Simi, it's been an intense little portal of time to really kick this year off in a good old-fashioned way and instigate some doubt as to whether any of us are going to get anywhere near what we're intending to get near this year. It seems to be a bit of a pattern for January, to be honest. I remember many, many Januaries where the energy is very topsy-turvy, unstable. It's an unstable time of year. And of course, it's perfect for perpetuating doubts that what you have chosen to step forward to in a more intentional way may not be going to happen. And you know what doubts are. Once the seeds of doubts are in place, they tend to propagate and bring about that outcome where things don't work because we're doubting that they might work, right? Confidence is key. Not brash egoic confidence that just puts your head down and charges, but a deeper sense of confidence in your heart that everything's working out for you. Hey, Sister Sandra from Canada, how are you? So let's go. I'm going to read Kate's question first, and then I'm going to attempt to talk to it. So here we go. Hopefully I won't start answering before I've finished reading. I'm going to read it off this screen because it's much easier. Any advice for overwhelm? Full stop. I'm floundering, it seems, in less capacity. I just keep doing what I can and being compassionate as best I can. And it would be good to step through it. Not being compassionate, but actually feeling that you're floundering, right? Okay, just remember to think of it as releasing. And one card I drew for this week was keep your eyes on the targeted intention. That's great advice. I guess I need to break things down though, because it seems so big. I'm going to challenge that belief in a minute. And then once it's broken down, there's so many targets. How do you manage this, Matt? Do you do goals? I'll start at the end. Yes, I do goals, of course. We all do goals. Otherwise, it's very hard to get anything done if you don't actually set yourself some goals. The thing with goals is not to be too rigid with them. I have goals that are hourly goals. I have goals that are daily goals. I have goals that are for the week, and I have goals that are for the longer term, right? Quarterly, yearly, lifetime goals. I have lifetime goals. I have things that I'd like to achieve before the sand stops running through my hourglass, right? Because just to talk a little bit, a goal is an intended outcome that has a time frame on it, right? That's what a goal is. You put a time frame on an intended outcome. You can have intended outcomes without time frames, and they're not particularly goals, right? So that's what a goal is. A goal has both the advantage of a time frame and the disadvantage of a time frame. The disadvantage is we can quite often get contracted around time is running out and we need to giddy up, and we get a bit stressed or desperate about achieving our intended outcome. The advantage of a goal of the time frame is that it gives us some motivation to take action now. Not now, but right now, right? Because there's a time frame and we understand that time slips away. And so an intended outcome is great, but if we don't put a time frame on it, then we are more likely to allow our egoic resistance or our emotional resistance to prevent us from taking action. Oh, it doesn't feel like it's the right time yet. Well, when is it going to feel like the right time? That's the point. That's why we hold ourselves to account by making it a goal and saying, I'm going to get this done before the end of the year. I'm going to get this done before the end of the day. I'm going to get this done before I have my next coffee break, whatever it might be, right? We have to, it seems, to motivate ourselves as humans with such intention to get things done by a certain time. So that's why we make it a goal. So yes, I do goals, but, right, it's no point doing a goal to the point where it puts you into overwhelm. Hey, Brother Richard and Sister Carolyn, how are you? So let's just talk a little bit about overwhelm. For those of you just joining, I'm reading a question from Kate that's on the page. I tend to put out a notification that I'm coming on for chat with Matt the night before, which is intended to be about 12 hours before. Last night it was 10 hours and 45 minutes before. The chat with Matt goes live to give people an opportunity to write in a question ahead of time, because you can write in a more voluminous question ahead of time than what you can do on the screen for me to read as I'm going. And it also gives me a chance, if I read it before, which I did with Kate's before I did my meditation this morning, to have a little bit of a think about how I might structure the answer, which could be good or bad. But anyway, if you're wondering how to write in a question ahead of time, just look for a post that comes out about 12 hours before Chat with Matt goes live. And I'm pretty much sticking to a schedule that Chat with Matt happens at this time every week. Give or take, right? Again, nothing's rigid. Sometimes things come up and I have to shift things around. But anyway, so overwhelm. Let's just talk a little bit about overwhelm so we understand what it is and why we're trying to avoid it, or if it's appropriate to try and avoid it, right? Because Kate wrote in, it would be good to step through it, right? Feeling that I'm floundering in overwhelm. So first and foremost, overwhelm is this sensation that we've got a lot of something, too much of something to process comfortably now, right? We feel mentally overwhelmed, and we also feel emotionally overwhelmed from time to time. Overwhelm can mean either. We quite often, and it's not necessarily negative, like we can be overwhelmed with positive energy. I'm overwhelmed in joy right now, which basically means I'm feeling more joy right now than I am used to feeling. And we say I'm overwhelmed by that. It's more than I'm used to. Now this threshold is dynamic for all of us. So what overwhelms someone won't overwhelm someone else because they have a higher capacity, and we can shift our own capacity by exercising in that realm. So if it's, for example, experiencing joy, the more often we experience joy up to and around our threshold, the higher we will reach our threshold, and we'll now be comfortable receiving that amount of joy which once overwhelmed us. It's an interesting concept, really, isn't it? Overwhelmed with an emotion, either joy or grief or whatever that overwhelms us. Like anger's a big one, right? We often feel when anger arises, it feels overwhelming, more than we can process, more than we can handle, more than we can really control, because overwhelm sort of comes back to this idea that we're supposed to be in control of what we're feeling or what we're thinking, what we're experiencing. And really, overwhelm is the sensation of being out of control. It is very much a mental connotation. So even an emotional overwhelm is basically our mental response to an emotional feeling that is beyond what we're used to feeling. And now our mind has triggered this response that we call overwhelm, which is basically a concern that something is happening at a degree that's beyond our ability to process. And it's a mental processing sort of thing that happens, or feel comfortable with, which again is our ability to categorize an experience. So any experience that's new tends to be overwhelming, right? Even if it's a relatively mild experience, if it's new, it tends to overwhelm us because our mind is now struggling to put it in the appropriate categories and definitions around it because we haven't done it before. Anything that's new to the mind, we don't have or it doesn't have much data on. And that's the mind's job, right? When we understand the mind, then we're going to understand the process of overwhelm a little bit more. The mind, and the mind's not wrong, by the way, I'll just put that out there first and foremost. The mind's job is to gather data from outside of us and to categorize it. It tends to want to keep us safe. That's its first and foremost job, right? To keep us safe, to keep us alive. And so the mind is very much concerned with what's going on and is it a threat or not. So it's taking this data from the external world and it's running it through. Basically, the mind is a massive database, or has access to a massive database of experiences that we've had in the past and things that we've been told in the past, bits of data that we've collected, and whether we, usually collects bits of data that it believes is true, but it also collects data that it's skeptical about as well, and puts that in different definition. It's looking for proof as to whether this should be completely thrown out or whether it does has elements of truth, right? The mind has different categories. Things it believes is absolute truth. The mind believes things are absolute truth, which is, to me, delusional, but the mind does it based on having a whole heap of evidence to prove that it's absolute truth. The interesting thing is, from my more expansive understanding now, that the mind is influencing how we perceive things. So what it believes is an absolute truth, it always looks for data to prove that it's an absolute truth, and of course finds that data. So we perpetuate the belief that it is absolute truth and keep proving it to ourselves by changing the tint on our glasses so that we see it in that way each time. We're not actually looking for proof that it's not happening. Hey, Brother John, and hello, Brother Darren. This is Chat with Matt. Answering a question around overwhelm at the moment, or attempting to. I seem to have gone off track, but that's pretty normal. So talking about how the mind functions right now and what triggers this response called overwhelm. So talking about this idea that the mind's job is to look at data that we're collecting from the external world and categorize it, specifically looking for what is a threat or what is an ally, what's going to help us survive, what's going to endanger our survival, so that we can take the appropriate action. That's how the mind works. So we get overwhelmed when we're subjected to more data, or data that's not easy to categorize. So more data than we can comfortably process and categorize. Now that happens more, we more easily get triggered into overwhelm when we're receiving data that's not easy for our mind to categorize it. In other words, we're not used to receiving this data. There's not a clear neural pathway to where this data fits as a threat or a benefit to us, or it's just beyond what we have categories for. That becomes very easily overwhelming for us. New experiences are very easily overwhelming, or we can just get overwhelmed by the quantity of data that is coming to us in any particular moment. We have more things to do than we can focus on and categorize, and we start to feel out of control. Our mind feels out of control. Our mind starts getting concerned that we might miss something that's important, either a threat or a benefit. We might miss it now because of the quantity of data, or the fact that the data is not easily categorized is starting to come in, and we start to get concerned. The mind starts to get concerned that we're not going to do a good job of controlling this, of looking at all of the data in an appropriate way and making the appropriate conclusions about that data, because that's what the mind wants to do. It wants to put it in a box and then it's done, right? This is a threat. This is a benefit. And what kind of threat, what kind of benefit, where does it fit? All of the different categories things go down into. That's the mind's job. And when it's getting more data than it can comfortably deal with, it goes into this thing called overwhelm. So overwhelm in itself is not necessarily dangerous. It's not necessarily bad. The only way our mind gets better at analyzing and categorizing data is to train, right? Is to have experiences that push it to get better at dealing with data. The way we do that is to put ourselves into mild states of overwhelm, challenging situations that help us get better at dealing with these types of situations. And then we slowly grow so that we can cope with more quote unquote stressful or challenging situations. So when we get overwhelmed, first and foremost is not to automatically make this a wrongness. We tend to have a connotation in our society that when I'm overwhelmed, it's wrong. And it's very easy for our mind to trigger a stress response, e.g. a biological response where we think we're in danger when we're starting to feel overwhelmed. And when that happens, unfortunately, it reduces our ability to cognate and to make rational decisions. When we go into a stress response, we get ready to fight or run, right? Or freeze, fight, flight, or freeze. So that's not helpful. We can avoid triggering stress response by choosing to maintain an aware state that I am overwhelmed right now, but truly I don't feel in danger, right? To make that call that really I'm not in danger right now, and I don't need to feel that a stress response is appropriate. Of course, that requires our awareness to catch that before it happens, because after it happens, we then become aware that, hey, I've become stressed, right? We start to feel that our muscles have contracted. We might be sweating. We might notice that we're now hyper vigilant to stimuli, like our eyes dilate, our hearing gets more acute, and we get startled more easily. Our breathing has become shallow, and our mind is now racing, and we're starting to feel the feelings of fear, right? I don't need to describe it. Most of us have this relatively frequently, right? What we might call anxiety. We now have fear-based thoughts running through our head. We now, because this stress response is running, which has been triggered by an overwhelm, we're now starting to see everything as a potential threat. We're now on guard and basically fighting for our life. Our mind is now looking, it has a negative bias to the world that something is coming to get us, right? That has been triggered because too much stimulus came in for us to cope with, and we triggered a stress response as a result of our feeling of overwhelmed, and now we're on guard. Once we're on guard, again, we have this bias that things are dangerous. And so things appear dangerous. And when you start to look at things as dangerous, then more often than not, they hurt you, right? They hurt you in some way, because what you believe is what you create. So we tend to create our own world, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy of what we fear. So it's really beneficial that if we can allow ourselves to push or find ourselves overwhelmed without allowing it to become a threat, and thus not triggering a stress response. So to do that requires this thing called awareness. We need to be aware when we start to feel this feeling of overwhelm, when we start having more come in than we're comfortable processing, and to, at that point where we're aware that we're starting to get overwhelmed, remind ourselves that this is not necessarily dangerous. Hey, Sister Teresa, how are you? We're talking about overwhelm. It's not necessarily dangerous. It could actually be a good thing that I'm exercising my ability to process information right now, right? It could actually be a good thing. I know, I go to the gym, right, to exercise, and sometimes I get to the gym and I'm pushing out the weights or on the treadmill or doing whatever, and it's like, what the fuck am I doing this for, right? It's like, is this really a good thing or not? It's easy for our mind to go in and to lose track of the idea of why I went there. I went there to get stronger, and now I'm complaining about the discomfort of getting stronger, right? We do that all the time. That's a very human thing to do. So the same thing happens with life. We're living life to get better at doing life. We're actually here on this planet to expand our ability to be ourselves. And then we start complaining that we're getting stretched, which doesn't make sense, right? Because that's why we came to the planet for the first time. In the first idea, whatever I'm trying to say, we came to this planet to be stretched so that we could grow, to evolve, right? And then we start complaining that we're getting stretched and it's not comfortable. If we can let go of this belief that getting stretched and feeling discomfort is actually a bad and wrong thing, then we can actually go through the process in a far more empowered way, in a far more joyful way, and we can actually enjoy the experience of evolving, even though necessarily it involves moments of discomfort and getting stretched out of our mental comfort, right? Our ability to stay in control. Now, I'm gonna have a quick drink. Feel free to write in and interrupt me. Well, it won't be an interruption, but feel free to add to what's going on. Oh my God, I just managed to lose what I'm doing here. I'm just checking that no, I have been seeing comments. There just hasn't been many of them. It's mainly been hi and g'day sort of stuff. So, overwhelm. So what I really want to help here, understanding what overwhelm is going to help you deal with overwhelm, and more importantly, I'm just trying to find the question again. Here it is. And how can we manage this, right? How can we set goals? How can we hold ourselves to account? How can we choose to step forward in the most expansive way, right? How can we stretch ourselves without then triggering this negative experience of overwhelm where we feel like we're failing and we start beating ourselves up, and then we beat ourselves up for feeling beat up, and we drive ourselves down a hole where we're just not good enough and not worthy, and what's the point and why am I even here, right? Type depression experience, right? And I know I've been there and I still go there sometimes. I can't say that I'm completely finished with allowing that to happen, because it happens. And we find ourselves from time to time in situations that are very challenging, and it is easy to get overwhelmed in that challenge, and to allow that mentality to perpetuate, right? Where we start driving ourselves down a hole based on our own judgment to how we're dealing with the situation. So we beat ourselves up for feeling beat up. We get down on ourselves for being overwhelmed. It's like going to the gym and stacking more weight on the bar than you've ever lifted before, and then beating yourself up for not being able to lift it, right? We have to go through a process of building up to being able to do anything. We have to, you don't sit down at a piano for the first time and then just start playing Mozart's whatever, right? You don't. You have to start where you start and learn and grow and be willing to make mistakes and be willing to get overwhelmed and be willing to push yourself into a situation where you feel like, I can't do it. And it's true, you can't do it. And you're not wrong for not being able to do it. But the point is you need to be willing to try. You need to be willing to try with a mentality that's open to the experience of disappointment. Oh, I tried that, but it didn't work. That doesn't mean you throw it out forever. It means that now you have to go back a couple of steps and start building the foundations, right? Building the foundations. So the experience of, just going back to Kate's question, is I'm floundering in today's energy, right? Particularly in today's energy, or maybe not today. Today I'm feeling a little bit better. I had a few big wins yesterday, by the way. I might tell you about them in a moment. But it always helps when you have a big win. And one of them was, I will tell you, we finally sold a block of land that we have subdivided off the front of our property. Well, we haven't sold it. We accepted an offer yesterday that is well within our target. So that's a relief after, about 8 months of it being sort of on and off the market. So yeah, financially that was an awesome release yesterday. I also booked my tickets to Thailand yesterday just before I got that news, which is also awesome, right? Going over for a retreat that's happening in early July, and I'm flying over in late June. So that's good. I'm excited about that as well. So there's a bit of a lift in my energy today as a result of those experiences. But in general, these last few days, last few weeks have been particularly overwhelming. So it's important, Kate and everyone, that we take allowance and we find compassion as best we can for the experience, for the understanding that it is overwhelming at the moment. And it's not wrong that we're getting pushed out of our comfort zones, our mental comfort zones, our mental ability to control and categorize what's happening in our life. I'm going to read this in a moment, Teresa. Don't panic. I'm coming back to that. But what I also want to say is understand why our mind is so fixated on needing to control everything is because over the last few lifetimes, we've been in a very dense energy on this planet, right? The energy on this planet has been very dark, and we have not had access to good intuitive guidance very easily over the past couple of thousand years. To get intuitive guidance over the last couple of thousand years has required an immense amount of quote unquote spiritual practice and effort, right? Meditating for many, many hours a day, doing rigorous spiritual practices to cut through the density that we're existing in. So the majority of us had to rely more on our smarts to survive than on our intuitive guidance, because intuitive guidance just was not easy to attain. That has changed a lot over the last 50 years, and particularly over the last 5 years. That has changed a lot. We now have much more ability to intuitively know what to do, as opposed to having to keep ourselves safe with our mind. So with this influx of energy, we are all being enticed or invited to get out of this mental game of trying to control everything, because truly, when we start allowing ourselves to run from our heart, to run from our intuitive guidance, we can have much better outcomes than just trying to do it from our controlling mind. The thing with the controlling mind is it works from the past. It's using data it's collected in the past to make conclusions and choices about what to do into the future, right? We're categorizing things based on what we've experienced in the past. And while that can work to keep us safe from threats, it doesn't really work very well for embracing new opportunities and to really stepping into thriving experiences. It's more interested in surviving experiences, right? So it'll play safe. The mind will always play safe rather than reaching out for a bigger potential. Our soul now, our higher self, is trying to get us out of that way of doing the world, because we have much more ability now to step forward from our heart into thriving and expansive experiences. So the mind is losing its hold over us and feels less and less in control all the time, which in turn is triggering more of this sort of overwhelm type response, because we are stepping forward now faster and faster than ever into more and more expansive experiences, and that is very hard for the mind to... I'm just getting reminded that I've got a Q&A call coming up in half an hour, which is true. And I've come to the end of my chat with Matt time, but I'm still going, and I've got to answer Teresa as well, which I will do. So the point is, it's not inappropriate to feel that the mind is losing control, and in losing its control, because we're now operating more and more from our heart, it is going to trigger or shout overwhelm. More and more often the mind shouts overwhelm because it's not keeping up with how fast we're moving forward from our heart. Again, that's not wrong, but the mind is just having to go through a process where it can relax out of needing to maintain control of it all the time, and the mind can start accepting... Yeah, I know, thank you, calendar. And I know, see, Darren, I do use a calendar. It just doesn't always have the information I need. It's okay, I missed a call with Darren yesterday. Well, I was late. He had to remind me. But the point is, my friends, feeling this mental overwhelm is not a wrongness, and we're just needing to allow ourselves to go through it as we start to operate more and more from our heart. We can ease the symptomology of this overwhelm response by choosing to stop, drop, and breathe, right? To go, wow, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm on the verge of starting a stress response, or I have started a stress response to this overwhelming feeling I'm feeling from my mind space. I'm going to stop and close my eyes and take several breaths, right? And just remind myself that I am actually safe right now. There is no real immediate threat to my life, to my survival, and I can breathe out and let go of this stress response, and I can allow my mind to calm down and not need to understand and categorize everything that I'm currently experiencing. It's just to remind the mind that our survival is not dependent anymore on us understanding and categorizing absolutely everything that we're being subjected to, right? So even though the mind is feeling fearful that it might miss something that's important, we have to start to bring our trust back to, I'm trusting my intuitive guidance right now. I'm trusting what I feel from my heart, and I'm going to keep progressing despite the fact that my mind is having trouble processing all of this information. But I believe that it's not necessary to process all of the information. And it's just a matter of having these experiences and realizing that we survive these experiences so that our mind can relax for next time we have the experience. The more of these experiences that I have, right, that are potentially overwhelming, more information than I can process and survive, and not only survive but have good outcomes, the more that I can relax around the sensation next time my mind is putting its hand up and going, hey, I'm overwhelmed, I'm not processing all of this stuff, we need to slow down because we might miss something, or we might step into danger here because I'm not keeping up. We can relax, right? We don't need to freak out that our mind's not keeping up and trigger the stress response in as a result of feeling this thing called overwhelm. So you don't necessarily need to break your targets down. Keep your eyes on the big target, the big prize, and then just trust, Kate, that you don't need to mentalize your way there, that you can actually get there from a more heart-based process, from a more intuitive process, and it's not your mind's job to actually achieve all of the goals that you are setting. Keep your attention with your mind on the outcome without necessarily worrying too much about what the process is to get there, right? Don't worry too much about the solutions. Definitely don't worry too much about the perceived problems and challenges, right? Yeah, recognize them, breathe your way through them, take evasive action when necessary, when it feels appropriate, but don't allow yourself to be too mental with thinking that this is how I'm going to have to break these goals down and work step by step and da-da-da-da. That is overwhelming when you try to think your way into an outcome that your mind doesn't know how you're going to get there, right? Your mind just doesn't know, because the potential now for something new happening beyond what's happened in the past is so much greater. So if it hasn't happened in the past, your mind doesn't know anything about it. So we have to be willing to step out of mind's comfort, which is based on what we know from the past, into more expansive experiences and take the risk that this feels in alignment with me, and therefore I'm going to go for it. Awesome. I think I've answered Kate's question. I'm going to quickly flip around now and talk to what Teresa wrote in, and Sister Jen. And I've already missed Teresa's question, but I'll get it on this screen. Anyway, Jen says, I don't use the word overwhelm anymore with a big smiley face. I say, I'm feeling stretched to receive more of this, which helps me make a better decision around whether I want to continue or remain open to receive more of it, or if I need to come back to myself and nurture myself. Awesome. I find it easier for my body to soak in information rather than my mind. Yeah, also awesome, right? Because information itself isn't wrong. It carries a vibration, and we can feel information. We can receive information on a lot of levels, more than just the intellect, right? I've heard of people who basically put books of information that they want to absorb under their pillow. They don't actually read the book. They just allow the vibration of the book to influence them, which is an interesting concept, right? Sister Teresa wrote something in before. Here it is, and see if I can get the see more button to work. There we go, it did work. At work and listening in for, so you're at work and listening in for how not to overwhelm. Sorry. Either I'm having trouble reading or you missed a word, but it doesn't matter. Gave a good presentation this morning. Oh yeah, awesome, to the students, and may have clients coming in from that. Very, very awesome. Well done, Teresa. Also another presentation as they want me again. So yay. Awesome, sister. So embracing your role as an educator, right? As someone who has information, and more importantly than information, you have wisdom and beingness and light to share, right? So you're not just sharing your information, you're sharing your presence with those students, and they appreciate that and want more of it, right? And some of them are going to be attracted to you because they like what they feel and what they see and what they hear, and they're going to come to you to work more intently with you, right, as a client. So that is awesome. You're just writing back to me what I said, Kate. I had to read that 3 times. I think I've answered Kate's question. This is written by Kate brilliantly. Thank you. Awesome, Kate. So, yeah, very happy, obviously, maybe not obviously, but I'll state it. Very happy to keep riffing on this idea of overwhelm, and we'll be back next week. So, let me know if, how that perpetuates for you. And I understand, right, you're there in Byron Bay with the friggin' smoke and the and the potential for mass destruction with fires and whatnot, very close over the last several weeks/months. Fear is very, very palpable, and it's much easier to get overwhelmed when we're in the stress response. When we're in the stress response, our cognitive function is reduced, and our mind gets back to very, very basics: yes or no, threat or ally, right? And ready to run or fight. So it gets harder and harder to cognate and take information in when a stress response is triggered. And when living in a fearful environment with danger around, real danger around, it gets harder and harder to stay out of at least an underlying level of perpetual stress, and therefore cognating gets harder and harder, and therefore the experience of overwhelm becomes more and more easy or prevalent. And so be compassionate, do your practices, take a lot of time out for relaxation and mental stabilizing practices to help you reduce your level of stress hormones in the body so that you can feel more mentally balanced, right, and able to cognate and able to function, right, and not to go into overwhelm, which is basically more information than you can process comfortably. Okay, my friends, well, I've gone well over time for Chat with Matt. Anyway, my friends, hopefully that was beneficial for you. If you have any questions, if you feel that I can help you in a deeper way, if you want to work with me in any way, whether that's joining our ongoing community, the Mantara Transformation Empowerment Support Community, which is very high value, low cost way of working much more intently with us, or whether you're looking for more help, if you're a facilitator of some sort, or a service provider, a massage therapist, or a whatever, book editor, it doesn't really matter. But if you're a heart-based service provider or facilitator, and you feel that you'd like some help in attracting more and more of your best clients and stepping forward and earning some more money and feeling more prosperous and purposeful in your pursuits, then reach out and I'll gladly get on a call and talk with you about how we can do that for you. Much love, my friends. Bye for now. We'll be back next week, if not before. Take it easy. Much love. And the finish button.